Considered by many to be Ocarina of Time's spiritual successor, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is oft regarded as a mere reimagination of a beloved game, rather than a reinvention of the Zelda formula. And despite releasing to exceedingly positive reviews from mainstream media outlets, the fanbase has dubiously confined Twilight Princess to the unsacred realm of conventionality. Though it clearly draws inspiration from Ocarina, Twilight Princess innovates and expands enough to extricate itself from a title that is widely hailed as the greatest game of all time, subsequently surpassing its source of inspiration in every way. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is the best action-adventure game ever made. The tale begins with our young hero Link, herding sheep in the homely village of Ordon. The introductory hours serve as a tutorial for various gameplay mechanics and establish the decidedly darker tone that paves the way for the rest of the story. Text-laden cutscenes drive the story, which is an outdated presentational instrument to be sure, but the characters are enhanced through sharp dialogue, charming sound effects, and imagination that fill each one with voice. Likewise, each scene is cinematically produced and fully accentuates the beautifully epic world. However, the main story is at times convoluted, but its moments of bemusement are heavily overshadowed by the game's captivating presentation. Graphically, Twilight Princess is an absolutely beautiful game. Rough around the edges with regard to textures, polygon counts, and draw distances, but ultimately mitigated with polished art direction, organic environments that foster listless exploration, and evocative lighting that accurately reflects the mood of the narrative. The ominous yet realistic art direction flawlessly complements a gloomy sound design comprised of simple sound effects and sweeping, epic orchestrations. Moreover, the tale closely reflects the structure of a traditional adventure movie. A slow, character-oriented beginning, a meaty, plot-driven middle, and an action-packed climax. The three sections possess their own pace, both in action and exploration, that renders the ever-changing experience as perpetually fresh. The story elements are so deeply ingrained with the presentation and the gameplay that it's impossible to separate the three. The presentation lends context to the story gives meaning to the gameplay, and the gameplay enriches the adventure. The success of each component hinges on the success of another, and in this case, the entire experience is greater than the sum of its parts. The marriage of each component can be exemplified through Twilight Princess's artistic style. Nintendo relinquishes its cartoony graphics from Wind Waker in favor of the gritty realism that personified Ocarina and Majora's Mask. The twilight cast upon Hyrule infects the world, along with its inhabitants, with an ethereal-like quality that breeds despondency. Naturally, the mist of Twilight makes sense, given our antagonist's motivations, such that the foreboding atmosphere never feels artificial. Subsequent gameplay mechanics like wolf transformations are derived from the story and the presentation, and although much of the wolf segments are tedious and uninteresting, the gameplay is ultimately made better by its connection to the plot. The gameplay in Twilight Princess is deeper and more varied than prior installments. Numerous mechanics ensure that your experience is rarely monotonous. Link acquires new items at an alarming rate, consequently opening up an abundance of diverse gameplay opportunities. Traditional staples like swordplay and puzzle solving remain at the core of the series, however. But both having received facelifts, these conventions are as fresh as they've ever been. For example, Link boasts a large repertoire of advanced techniques, many of which take advantage of the Wii's motion controls. Although the actions on screen can be and were easily translated to button inputs for the Gamecube, the motion controls allow for a level of immersion that could never be obtained by a controller. But most importantly, they never detract from the experience via laggy or imprecise inputs. Essentially, your sword feels like an effortlessly wielded appendage. Specific sections of the game require Link to transform into a wolf, whereby he must utilize his wolf instincts and skill set to solve puzzles and confront enemies. In wolf form, Link can sniff out clues, dig for treasures, and sense danger. However, puzzles rarely take full advantage of said abilities, instead being relegated to tedious collectathons that unnecessarily pad the game's running time. The wolf combat is correspondingly uninteresting. A limited control scheme grants few options when tackling enemies, thus subjecting the combat to a boring tedium dripped in facile repetition. Moreover, puzzle solving is similarly well executed. Contained primarily within dungeons, the inventive puzzles function as the apotheosis of a particular plot point. The temples serve as a playground for creativity, exemplified through puzzle designs that are relevant to their respective environment. In Lakebed Temple, you're tasked with directing the water pressure via 2 valves hanging from a moving stairway. In the remnants of an ancient city, puzzles require the generation of broken windmills. At its core, puzzle solving in Twilight Princess is made successful by virtue of great ingenuity, the closeness with which the puzzles coincide to their corresponding backdrops, and their seamless integration into the rest of the game. Much like the way puzzles are expertly peppered throughout the game, the general pacing allows for a perfect combination of puzzle solving, exploration, and action. Each component is an isolated experience, enabling each to shine in its own light. The pacing is undoubtedly formulaic, but it's a formula that has worked for years and will continue to work for years to come. With regard to exploration, the overworld is beautiful, rife with varied landscapes that alter in appearance as dusk turns to dawn. Twilight Princess boasts the largest overworld in franchise history, and is perhaps the biggest action-adventure game ever created. The world's scope permits a wealth of exploration opportunities. Secrets are tucked in well-concealed locations, although the treasures rarely assist in your main quest. And while the environments possess a natural beauty, they're often too sparsely populated and lack gameplay opportunities driven by character interactions, although it surely reflects a lonelier Hyrule. Conversely, Hyrule Castle itself is a breathing, bustling town that acts as a central hub for side quests via quirky side characters. Thus, even with environments that are perhaps a bit too deserted, there are still lively locales that lend context to your epic journey and inject substance to the world's inhabitants that you're trying to save. From the deep story and enchanting presentation to the varied, imaginative, and tight gameplay, Twilight Princess impresses from start to finish. Most impressive is how each facet of the game coincides with one another, fashioning a journey that will ultimately leave you breathless, inspired, and impassioned. There are aspects of the presentation, the inconsistent narrative, and gameplay mechanics, the wolf sections, that are not perfect, but the flaws rarely undermine the experience. Essentially, the harmonization of the big three, the story, the presentation, and the gameplay, render the lesser aspects of the game as inconsequential to the overall voyage. Ultimately, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is the embodiment of Nintendo ingenuity and sound game design. A true masterpiece. A 9.6 out of 10.